this is Stephanie Stock with Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom. With us today is Representative and Speaker Pro Temp Jim Butler. He's currently finishing out his 4th term in House District 41 and is a strong supporter of personal liberty, medical freedom, and free markets. So we're really excited to have you with us today, Jim. Thank you so much. He's here to talk a little bit about the Cure Bill, which is now law. It incentivizes private innovation for curing disease. So Jim, how did you come up with the idea for this bill, and why are you passionate about it?
Well, thanks for having me this morning, and good morning to you. So this bill's been a bill that I've been passionate about for over 20 years now, and it came from when my mother developed metastatic breast cancer. So when that happened, she had been already battling cancer, and then when it metastasized and spread throughout her body, of course, that's a very dire situation that a lot of people face. We wanted to look to see if there were any clinical trials, there was anything out there that could give her hope that she could try that might save her life. And so I went and I promised her that I would scour every last clinical trial, any possible treatments or, potential cures. And I worked day and night, and I went through every last one. I was calling people, and there were hundreds of clinical trials, and I think there still are. And not one of them could have cured her. They were all, different types of combinations of treatments. You can try chemo A and B, or A and C, or C and D, that type of clinical trial, and then maybe something works a little bit better, and that can allow you to live for an extra 2 weeks or a month, and that's really all of the clinical trials. So it was very disappointing, but and frustrating. Ultimately, my mom passed away, and it always hurt that and I also was very just flabbergasted at why were there no clinical trials that could cure somebody of that disease. So then my father developed pancreatic cancer 7 years later that also metastasized, and it was the same thing. This was my mother was 51 when she passed away, my father was 58. The same type of thing. There were lots of clinical trials, not one of them could potentially cure him, and then he ultimately passed away. And already I expected that from the experience with my mother. And so once I became a representative, it's something that I, of course, am very passionate about figuring out, well, why is that? What's the problem with that? And it's not just in cancer. I mean, it's in every disease, virtually every disease. Never want to speak in complete absolutes, but virtually every disease, there's lots of activity for treatments and virtually none for potential cures of a disease. And so, first of all, what I've discovered in all of my research over the last 20 years on this is that all of the money that comes from the government through the National Institute of Health and through charities, which is about 40% of all research and development spending annually in the United States, that is all for basic science research, which is great research, but it's mainly test tubes all the way through animal studies. And they have wonderfsome breakthroughs. Read about them in the paper all the time, where they've cured cancer in a mouse or multiple sclerosis in some other animal. But then we don't see that happen in clinical trials, and that's because for a new drug, a completely new molecule, that all of that research is done by the private sector. So the government research and charity research, they can't develop their own drug and file a new drug application. It has to be with a private company. And so that causes the problem where 2/3 of our research, it's a lot of money that goes into that, but it's driven by, well, what's going to make the best return on investment for that company. And so when they look at, well, what are we going to invest our money in, then it's more likely that you're going to be able to make money on an incrementally better treatment because it's more likely to be successful. It's easier to develop, to just change around a couple of parts of the already existing treatment. And it's more likely that it's going to go through clinical trials and then have great sales, but it's also going to have repeat sales because people continually need treated. And if somebody is simply cured, then they wouldn't need treatment anymore, especially if it's a short term of the treatment. You just can't make as much money on that. So, think of blood pressure medication or cholesterol medication that people take the rest, their whole lives. There's a lot of treatments that are like that. I mean, you can really make a lot more money, even over the life of a patent, which is generally by the time you get to market, maybe an additional 7 years. You're going to be able to make a lot more money, and not charge as much for the treatment, so it's not as much of a sticker shock for people, than something that just is once or over just a few weeks, where you have to charge, in order to get the same return on investment, you'd have to charge millions of dollars per treatment if it was a curative treatment, if it was a cure, in order to get the same return on investment. And that just isn't part of what people would accept. So if I'm a pharmaceutical or biotech CEO, and I'm looking at what, out of all this basic science that's out there, that's been done, what's the most promising molecule that I want to take the human clinical trials and get to the FDA process and get approved, I'm going to choose something that's a treatment that I can keep selling to people, and that's more likely and easier to develop than a cure. So that's the reason why we don't see cures, and we really haven't seen cures for decades. And we see a lot of treatments. I like treatments. I mean, I think we all do. Nothing against treatments, but there's no incentive for the cure. Or at least the incentive is not as much as it would be for a treatment, and therefore the cure bill adds that incentive.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I lost my mom earlier this year. I think you saw that. Yeah. ALS, again, another disease that they say there's nothing they can do. So there's plenty of those out there. And the process of going through an illness is so costly, even one where there's no cure. I mean, you look at something like ALS. Now, my mom didn't want to take extensive measures. She said, I don't want a tube, I don't want any of that. When it's my time, God's just going to take me. But a lot of people with that particular disease, and others like MS, can go on for decades on ventilators. It's very costly things to keep you alive. So for those diseases, you question whether or not there is any incentive at all to ever cure it, because you hate to say it, but it will make money for the medical industry. I mean, that's just a fact. So I think the idea of incentivizing an actual cure is brilliant, and it increases your chance for competition. So I applaud you for, as far as I know, being the only person that's put something like that forward. I don't know, has anyone else and any others? No, you're it. You're the lone ranger.
Well, so first of all, I guess, so I traveled around after this passed into law last July in Ohio. Then I traveled around the country, at least on the eastern half of the country, to all the different state legislatures to try to get them to pass this bill as well. Because the way this works, it doesn't cost any money. So there's no reason not to do it. All it does is pledge what the first 5 years of what taxpayers save, like as you mentioned, with ALS or with MS, it might not be even a treatment. It's just how much money does treating or caring for those with this disease cost the taxpayer. And so what the bill just says is we pledge the first 5 years of what we actually save as a reward if you come up with a cure that saves us the money. And you have to do that first, and then that reward comes to you. But it's tens of billions of dollars for many major diseases. But the way it's structured is all the different states, and it's a multi-state compact. So Ohio is the first state. We need 5 other states to pass it. But the more states that pledge that 5 years of savings, the first 5 years of savings, the greater the incentive is for somebody to cure the disease. And so it's structured in a way that we're not spending any money at all. And we're protected no matter what happens, and only sharing that first 5 years of what's actually saved by the state, by the taxpayers, mainly through Medicaid and employee health plans. But that's a considerable amount of money to the taxpayers, and enough to incentivize to a huge degree the private sector to innovate and come up with cures, which they could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be an FDA approved drug. It could be something that's just off the shelf. You just do this combination of natural remedies, for example, and if it works, it works. As long as you can prove it works, and hey, here this proves that this disease is cured, even if it's cured at a certain percent of the time, say 50% of the time, but it saves billions of dollars to taxpayers. That type of an incentive in the free market is going to stimulate innovation and result in a lot of new research, and in my opinion, a lot of cures for these diseases like ALS and MS and cancer, and Alzheimer's, and other, very expensive, debilitating disease. I mean, lots of different diseases. So that, in terms of going around the country, 14 states introduced the bill. From my efforts going around the different states and talking to their legislatures. And so unfortunately with COVID, that put a stop to, passage of the bill. So that was just starting right when COVID hit, but I'm hopeful that starting in the next year when legislative terms start again, that lots of states will introduce the bill again, and that we'll be able to get 5 more states to pass it into law, so that then it goes into effect, and all the diseases are put out there. What constitutes a cure is put out there very specifically, so people know exactly what that means, and then what the reward is if you come up with a cure. All those things get decided once 6 states total pass the cure bill.
Well, that's amazing. I wish that we could find a cure for overreaching government.
Yes, me too.
Let's incentivize that.
That would save us a lot of money too.
It sure would. It sure would. So a few months ago, there was some backlash. People were kind of chit-chatting about this. Oh, is this going to keep us in lockdown longer? Blah blah blah. Who would possibly be against this bill, and why? I know you cleared that up with us.
Right.
It doesn't have any effect on. They were worried about Acton having some sort of. This law has nothing to do with any of that, as you've explained. Who would be against something like this, and why?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, the healthcare industry, specifically pharmaceutical industry, in some states have been against it, overtly and officially, and in other states like Ohio, they were officially neutral, but it was pretty obvious they were also opposed to that. And I actually, one of my trips, I traveled down to Miami, but I drove down and stopped at states on the way down, and then I went back through DC on the way up. And that was at a conference for leadership for various state legislators. And I presented right after Pharma. And so Pharma's presentation was, we're researching cures, but that's what we're about. All we do is research cures. And then I got up after them and said, basically, no, you're not. I'm not trying to say that they're, I'm not trying to slam them in any way. I'm just saying the way that our system works is they are financially incentivized and they have a duty to their shareholders to make the highest profits they possibly can. So if they did anything else than what's best for their shareholders, then they would be in breach of their fiduciary duty and in big trouble, really, for these companies. That's just the system. That's their, and they really can't argue with that. But of course, they are not very supportive, I guess, or sometimes outright opposed to this idea because, in my opinion, it'll cost them money potentially if there's a cure. And the fact that they are opposed gives me a lot of confidence that this idea, the cure bill will work. They think it'll work. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother, and they'd probably be all for it because it might be good PR for them. So that's encouraging that they are taking steps in the various states to oppose it. And so we're going to keep fighting. And I think there's a lot of good people out there that I met around the country, or at least on the eastern half of the country so far, and some in some other states to the west, that really see this as something that really there's no reason not to do it. And you have everything to gain and nothing to lose by passing this and having this go into effect. And the worst thing that could happen with this is there are no cures are found, but we didn't spend any money, and so at least we tried. And I think we'll find a lot of cures for diseases, and a lot of people, especially who face issues with with their parents who are young, who are facing diseases, or their children, or other loved ones, and they're leaving us too soon. I think that this has great hope for those types of situations, and where we can come up with hope in a cure.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly hoping that some of these other states will pick it up if we can ever get out of this COVID mess and get back to life and real discussions about other things. I think it'll be absolutely amazing. And like you said, no cost, absolutely nothing to lose. I mean, who's not going to be for something that cures a disease and doesn't cost any money? I mean, everybody.
Well, I should add a caveat there. There's a very nominal cost just for administrative expenses.
Okay.
Offices and like a staff, but it's very, very minor. So I just don't want to misstate things, but it's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of any budget.
Yeah, you have to have someone behind a desk making it all go, right? We get that.
And
Now,
that's no different than any other multi-state compact. And most states are part of 20 to 40 multi-state compacts. I think Ohio is part of 40 different multi-state compacts. And each, or a lot of the multi-state compacts, they have this kind of administrative dues, which is, tens of thousands of dollars a year, usually for a whole state budget that's, 78 billion. So it's very minor. So
definitely. Now, speaking of being in opposition to curing disease, I'm pretty shocked, and you probably are too, at how many treatments are actually suppressed or vilified by the FDA. How did you feel about the 24-hour pharmacy ban on hydroxychloroquine prescriptions? I mean, what did you make of that?
Well, I made of it that it must have had some heavy lobbying from somebody who wants to make money, because it was completely unprecedented. So never does the Board of Pharmacy or anyone tell physicians, prescribers, healthcare providers, how they treat their patients, whether, and they do it on a routine basis for cancer and other things, especially, provide and prescribe drugs off label. So it doesn't have an official FDA approval for one particular illness, but it does for another. So it's on the market, that's off label. And, that is done routinely for many, many different diseases, and obviously is done currently because we haven't had a chance to get an approval for COVID for hydroxychloroquine. And actually having the government come in and try to stop that from happening is so unprecedented that I have no smoking gun proof as to this, but it sure looks like, there's, I think, remdesivir and some other drugs out there. There's a vaccine coming, all of which are very expensive. And it's very similar to the cure bill, where you have something that could be beneficial. And I'm not saying hydroxychloroquine is, I heard that it works actually from several experts in the field, but I don't know. I'm not a healthcare provider. But it's just, it might work, and it's pennies, and it's very safe. It's prescribed all the time. It's been prescribed for decades. And so having the government come in and try to change, something that's pennies, that's very safe, that the doctor in consultation with the patient decides that that's the best thing for them, it is just unprecedented. So I guess I was, even with all the stuff going on, I was shocked about that. I mean, that's really going far. So I was glad to see it was reversed, but I just couldn't believe that it happened.
Yeah, it almost felt like it was kind of a test. Like, are they awake yet? What kind of backlash will we get? Well, what we posted on that, I think it got over like 1 million views or so. I mean, people were up in arms over that. I mean, I don't know anybody who didn't think that was just crazy. Even people that were in support of the current measures the governor is taking were like, whoa, that's too far. So that was really disturbing. I'm glad they reversed it, but the fact that they would even try is alarming to me. It makes me wonder what other things they have up their sleeve for later,
And it can cost, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you finish first.
I was going to say, it can cost lives. So if it does work, and then you prohibit it, and somebody is seriously ill from COVID, and then now they can't get it. This is a government action that could cost lives. And that's like saying, well, we're going to stop this particular chemo from being prescribed off label, even though it's approved. It's been chemos obviously aren't safe. They have huge side effects, chemotherapy. And then coming in and saying, well, you can't try this chemotherapy for somebody who's seriously ill from cancer. It just doesn't happen. And obviously the side effect profile from chemotherapy is way worse than hydroxychloroquine. So just unprecedented.
Yeah, and I actually talked to some physicians who are much more naturally minded in their prescribing, and even they said hydroxychloroquine is one of the more benign things that you can prescribe. And that's coming from people who, are very naturally minded. So it was pretty appalling, and it was kind of telling of where we are right now, especially with the cost of the other treatments.
Exactly.
Speaking of overreach of government, how do you feel the governor's orders have affected the state? How much worse do you see this getting or better? Where do you kind of stand on all of this?
Well, I was most concerned when it all started with the order for non-essential, which as it was had a really broad meaning, medical procedures and treatments and everything else being locked down and stopped. So right away when the lockdown order came in, then even people that weren't scared by the director and of course everybody, it was new, so I mean a lot of people were hesitant just at first, but just kind of all the numbers and people getting really afraid. Even more than that, by actually saying you have to shut down all you doctors' offices, all you cardiac testing facilities, all you cancer screening facilities, all of those really important measures, in addition to kind of ongoing treatment, mental health treatment, addiction treatment. I mean, all these different areas were stopped or were significantly hampered, and that was devastating. And so one of my first efforts, along with Senator Lehner here in my district, was to write the governor and say, we think that you really need to have non-COVID related medical come back. Obviously you can take, precautions and do everything that you need to do to try to minimize the spread of COVID, but, this is likely hurting more people than it's helping. And so I thought that was a particularly bad decision. Again, I get that they thought there was going to be this giant millions of people flooding the hospitals and everything else, but it rapidly became apparent that wasn't going to happen. And I think that I was glad to see that he reversed that in late May. But I think that, that decision should have been reversed a little, earlier than that. So that was one thing. I actually think another thing, I think we could have done better, and we still could do better. And I talked to the Department of Health about this, and I don't think they were very willing. And it's actually been 3 or 4 weeks since I spoke with them. Is in nursing homes. I think the statistic is around 75% of all deaths are occurring in nursing homes, and that is, and so that's where our most vulnerable population is. And so, not to mention that you have some different orders out there that are stopping loved ones from interacting or seeing their loved ones who might be, terminally ill, so you can say goodbye. I think that's just not been handled as well as it could have been, and still could be. And that I think you should have the option for a person or a caregiver, if they're the guardian, if you want to really protect them and cocoon them, then you could have a system where the staff actually does, month-long shifts. You can pay them triple, take volunteers. But that way, if they really want to have no contact, because right now the staff's going, they're going out on the weekends or whatever, and then they bring it in COVID. But then loved ones can't even come in, and
right.
visit their family member. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. If you really want to be kind of cocooned and safe, then give somebody the option of doing that on the one hand. But then also, this is kind of back to freedom and being able to make your own choices. But if you want to have a place where family can come and interact freely, have that be another choice. So having different choices out there, ODH could do that and say, hey, if you really are concerned about your loved one, or your loved one is themselves concerned about it, then we're going to make it so the staff is definitely not going to spread COVID to you. That will give you that option. And then if you're not concerned, or if you're okay with, social distancing and those types of things, and then being able to actually have your loved ones come visit you, you also have the option here. Right now, we have the worst of both worlds, where you have the staff interacting, and bringing in COVID, and then loved ones not able to see, their family members. And so you're not really doing anything necessarily to really minimize the spread as much on the one hand, and then you're hurting people, and their important bonds with their family members on the other. So I just think and that was something from the very beginning that I tried to advocate for, and it wasn't obviously adopted. So I just think kind of a one-size-fits-all approach is not a good one there.
Yeah, and having worked in nursing homes for almost 15 years, I mean, a lot of these patients, their family is their only advocate. I mean, some nursing homes it's not a great place to be. And so I think we're seeing deaths from other things because they're not getting the advocacy from the family member that they would be getting. You know, forget COVID. I mean, some of these people have lost the will to live and they're just now giving up to whatever they had, or, you know, something else happened, or there's elder abuse and it goes on, you know, you don't find it. And, you know, so these people are dying from other causes. And, you know, depression rates got to be incredible in there. My mom, I mean, with ALS, you can imagine getting what getting COVID would do to someone who was already could barely breathe as it was. My mom didn't want me to mask. She wanted her grandsons over there as much as possible. Nobody wants to die alone. Exactly. I mean, to that age, you've lived your life. And I mean, I don't mean to sound insensitive, but elderly people will die. I mean, we all will die. I mean, how do you want to die? How do you want to live? And that, like you said, that should be the person's choice. That the family should have a choice in that. And I agree with you. Handled horribly, horribly. And even birthing mothers, I mean, having your baby taken, they are testing you. Oh, you're positive for 10 minutes. I mean, what if it's like DeWine? Positive today, not positive tomorrow. You've lost 24 hours or 48 hours of bonding time with your brand new infant. Your husband wasn't allowed in the room. I mean, this whole thing has just been crazy top to bottom as far as how things have been handled in healthcare. So it's not even just the elderly, the newborns are getting it too. So that's disturbing, and it's still going on. We get reports constantly, such and such a hospital, they won't let me in. I've got a child that's on death's door. They won't let my husband be there. I mean, we get them all the time. And then, you know, we call them out on Facebook and we go to their page and we have 100 people call the hospital and the hospital's like, oh, well, maybe we'll let them in. You know, but I mean, it's sad that we have to take these courses of action to be able to get families in to be with their loved ones. But, you know, until something changes, I guess that's what we're going to have to keep on doing.
Well, a little ray of hope potentially is there was a telemedicine bill that we passed out of the House, and we included a provision in there that said that, as you meant, the last thing you mentioned, if a person who needs a guardian, or especially a child who needs a parent there, if you're in a hospital situation, and it's vital to that person's outcome that they accompany them throughout the hospital, that you have to let that happen. So that's still, now that's over in the Senate. So if they pass that bill and don't change that provision, at least there'll be something that will make the hospitals let the family member be there with their patient as they go through, you know, a medical procedure at a hospital.
Oh, that's wonderful news. Thank you. There is a ray of hope then. And what is that bill for?
I can't remember now because we've been out for a while for telemedicine, but it's the telemedicine bill. So
okay, telemedicine bill. I will look that one up. So going back to a couple weeks ago, obviously a lot of our members were super disappointed. You had a very narrow loss for House Speaker. You want to explain a little bit about how that vote was decided and how you personally felt about it? I know there was a lot of confusion as to how that went down, because caucus versus, you know, it going to the floor.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for your support and for many of the support out there, the people that offered their support. And I know that there were tons of emails that were flooding into the State House to various members. And I'm just really humbled by that. It really shows what people can do, the grassroots can do. And that was just in 9 total days from when former Speaker Householder was arrested until we had the vote for Speaker. That was just 9 days. And so the ability to really mobilize that level of support was just amazing. So I can't thank everybody enough for their support. You know, the way that the Speaker, I guess, is picked, and all leadership is picked, actually, traditionally going back decades, is the majority party, and this is to make sure that the minority party doesn't actually get to choose the Speaker, for example. If the majority party is split, so for example, you know, we have 61 members out of 99 in the Ohio House. Former Speaker Householder was absent, so that makes 60. And so if it's 30 to 30 and there's a split, and then the rest of the 38 Democrats vote for somebody that's a Democrat for Speaker, then you're going to have a Democrat Speaker if you go to the floor that way. So traditionally, to stop that from happening, then the caucus will meet, and then there'll be a vote within the caucus, and the majority of the caucus decides then who the pick will be, and then the whoever doesn't get that, then everyone rallies behind that person that was picked by the majority of the majority caucus. And then you go to the floor, and then on the floor, then the majority party all votes as one, and for whoever that is, to make sure that the minority party doesn't get to choose who the speaker would be. Obviously, the speaker is a very powerful position. That's traditionally how things are done. And this was, even though it was only in 9 days, done. And I think, very quick. It needed to be done very quickly because we were kind of leaderless there without the speaker. Myself being the number two, and then the rest of the leadership team, really worked well together with the rest of the caucus. The whole caucus came together 2 days before, so that at a meeting 2 days before the speaker was removed, and decided on what we were going to do as a caucus. So I was really proud of how everybody came together to do that. And then we had our caucus. It was extremely close, but I couldn't be more proud for of all the work that everyone who was supporting me did, and how well they performed. I mean, it just couldn't have been any better, especially over that short period of time, but we just fell a little short. And then we went to the floor, and as was traditional, then we voted for now Speaker Cupp, with the majority of the members. I think there were 55 votes. So that's how it works. So I know the press reported that I stepped down or something, or I backed out of the race or stepped out of the race. No, I didn't. We just, we went to the vote, and we just fell ever so short of getting there. And then we go to the floor as we traditionally do, and then vote for the person who won.
Right. And everyone's like, why did Butler not even vote for himself? I'm like, no, you guys don't understand.
Not how it works. No.
That all happened beforehand. They were really perplexed with that. Now,
Yeah.
What difference do you see between how you would have gone forward in leadership versus Cupp? What do you think the difference was there that would push them to the other side?
So who's them? Pushing
Just
them to the
votes, the people that were like versus Cupp, like in leadership role. What would be maybe some of the differences that you would have seen going forward?
The biggest difference that I think that a lot of members were looking at that were supporting me, I'm more on the conservative side, and I will not to say that Speaker Cupp's not conservative, but probably a little bit more on the conservative side. But really, it's because I'm term limited. So I'm done at the end of this calendar year. And what that means is because, normally you would have a new speaker election right after the general. For every single term, every 2 years, right after the general election, that caucus that I mentioned happens. And then it's a 2-month wait until the new session in January. And then you vote on the floor for who won that vote in usually November at that caucus meeting. So that's going to happen in November. There's going to be another caucus for the new members that are coming in next session. And everyone will get together and everybody will vote on who they think the speaker should be. And a lot of people that were supporting me said, we should pick somebody who's term limited, because that way they're not going to have an interest in who the next speaker is going to be, because they're going to be gone. I would not be able to, I wouldn't be at that special caucus in November, because that caucus is only for the members that are going to be there next session. So that just, would make me kind of a neutral arbiter of things and just focusing only on running the House and running campaigns and that type of thing, but kind of doing that in as neutral a way as possible, because, with various, hopefully this goes away, but factions within our caucus we've had historically. And so a lot of people thought, well, if you just have somebody who's not going to favor one side or the other, then that's better. And then the people that were supporting Speaker Cupp, I think they wanted to have more continuity and to have somebody who was speaker now and it's still going to be speaker in the next term also, because then they plan on supporting him. That doesn't mean somebody can't run against them, but that, that would have some continuity, and that there's whoever the speaker would be, they'd still be the speaker in the next session. So that there was just a disagreement, honest disagreement, and what was the best outcome there. And personally, I think a lot of the members who aren't members right now, but will be new members, for example, in my seat, because I'm term limited, so a new member will be elected, assuming they're Republican, then, they I would want them to have a voice as to who's their speaker will be in the next term. And again, that might still be the case, but that was just an honest disagreement between different members of the caucus as to what they wanted to see.
Okay, but as far as like leadership or how you would have moved forward as far as like the restrictions and that type of thing, do you guys have a lot of variance in how you would have gone forward as far as like the lockdown orders, etc.?
Well, I can just tell you how of course, my position, I don't know Speaker Cupp's position on that. But, certainly, and we pushed back when the election day was, changed for the primary election day. As we should have, because that's the prerogative of the legislature. And so, I believe in the Constitution and making sure that that's followed, and that where, the legislature needs to act, then we should act. We should be part of a lot of the decisions that are made. If something's an urgent emergency situation, then that's when we have the executive, just like the president. You take action, and that's what you need to have in that situation. But when it goes on for multiple days and then weeks, that's when you have more deliberation. The legislature is supposed to come in and make the laws, and then the governor can veto them or not. But that's the way it's supposed to work. And so that type of a approach for how the government, how the House, how the legislature should operate. It should operate based on the Constitution, and it's should be a collaboration with the governor, and him executing the law and us making the law. That's the way our system's supposed to work. So that's my philosophy. I can't speak for Speaker Cupp on that one, but I would hope that he's generally in agreement with that. I think he probably would be, but again, you'd have to ask him.
Well, we appreciate your leadership thus far, and we're going to be really sad to see you go. I'm definitely going to be sad. Do you foresee possibly getting back into public service again in the future? I know you've got some other endeavors you're working on, but yes. Do you think you maybe come back?
I could come back, but I'm going to go back to the private sector for a while, and then we'll see.
All right. Well, if you come back, we're going to give you all the support we possibly can. We'll send you some paraders and campaigners.
Oh,
stuff. I just want to really thank you again. You always make yourself available. You would think in a position like yours that you'd be like, oh, I don't have time for this or that. But, you always make yourself available. You're easy to contact with concerns or questions and stuff. So I really appreciate you. The information that I get for you that we can give to our members, they appreciate you as well. It was a great discussion today. We're gonna be so sad to see you go at the end of the year. So we'll keep in touch with you though, so we can know if you'll be back.
Absolutely.
Bodily autonomy, constitutional freedoms. Those are things we need now more than ever. So we're really encouraging people to work on campaigns of candidates that are for medical freedom, they're for individual liberties, they're for free markets, they're for all of those things that are so critical right now. So if you are interested in getting active volunteering on a campaign or of an OhioAMF verified candidate, you can email me at stephanie@OhioAMF.org. If you're interested in donating to help keep us going and help us keep you informed of what candidates and legislators stand with you, go to OhioAMF.org and you can donate today. And again, Jim, thank you so much for being with us. I know you got to let you go. You got a bunch of busy bee stuff you got to do today, but gosh, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, thanks for having me.